Okay, so we're live. Here's the deal. Late night American TV shows, talk shows, yeah. People younger than me, I don't think young people watch late night. I just don't. Strong argument to be made that, the big three, the primetime networks, regular young people don't watch those anyway because they have the internet and streaming and the ability to watch stuff they actually like instead of the idea of appointment viewing. Yeah. So having said that, is there a place in the future for late night talk shows like the American style, like Late Night with Seth Meyers or Conan or Colbert or I don't even know who's on anymore. James Corden, is he still on? Did he retire yet? So here's the deal. I'm going to do a chart. Let's pop up the chart here. Trying to address what I think is not working about current late night shows to see if there's a real shot at if somebody were to make one to actually make it work for the younger audiences, because let's be honest, eventually there's going to be not enough people who leave their TV on for their dogs to watch, and those very same people are going to age out / die at some point. And does that mean network television dies, or does that mean there's a new hope? I don't know. I guess this pitch is going to be basically my best guess as to if a production company or a studio came to me and said, hey, we're trying to make a late night show actually work for a younger audience. This conclusion that I've drawn with all these note cards is my best guess as to how it could work. It would still need testing. It would still need some revising because honestly, you don't know until you know. And we don't have that many examples of new ways of doing late night shows, especially in the US, to make it work. And I'll address that in this chart. So this is the chart. Left to right, we got elements, criticisms, solutions, a new, better late night show, which is going to be the last thing I do, notable other shows across the pond. The lights just changed, so that's concerning. Cautionary tales and criticisms of those cautionary tales. And again, we don't have very many on that side. That's why it's a smaller column. Yeah, so let's talk about the elements of late night shows, because I think that's the first thing we could address. We got a few things that we know. First one is host monologue. Usually the host is a comedian, but that's not always the case. But they're a famous person. They have host monologue. It's when they're in their suit or in some cases in their khakis, talking about whatever they're going to talk about. It could be stand up. It could be news. It is what it is. Even SNL does this with the host. The host, after the cold open, does a monologue, usually self-referential, usually about something about their career. Yeah, it's a thing. So I will admit, I'm including SNL as late night, but I'm really talking about talk shows, because I think talk shows, much like local news, it's just nails on a chalkboard for me. I can't get through it. So, coincidentally, news. Number two. I think the SNL approach to news with Weekend Update is probably going to be the answer, at least for the time being. But yeah, talk shows talk about news, but we have the internet. Next up, main topic. A lot of shows, the main topic isn't a huge topic. In the case of shows like Late Night, Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, it's huge. It's the main part of the whole thing. It takes up like 90% of the thing. It's a deep dive, but I would say Last Week Tonight is sort of the exception to the rule than the rule. Next up, celebrity interview. And this is really the nails on chalkboard, because it really feels like, like morning show stuff where, especially in the US, the celebrities come on basically to promote whatever they're working on, their book or their movie that's coming out, because they want to sell tickets, they want to get butts and seats. And that's really what it is. It's artificial, it's brief, it paints everybody in a really good light typically, and it's incredibly rehearsed. And I think people can tell because of the artificiality. The last thing is live performances from artists. This is usually a musical thing. In the case of Saturday Night Live, it's a musical guest. That's going to be the weird one that I don't really have an answer for, just because I'm still trying to figure out who the live performance is meant for, because If you've seen any of my other videos, I've actually addressed the fact that SNL, if you're a band or a musical act and you get on SNL, you will have already made it. So it's not like the stand-up thing where back in the day, if you were a stand-up, Johnny Carson would let you do your stand-up, and then if he invited you to the couch, that was you making it. I don't know what that looks like for musical artists today. I don't even have a guess, but it's definitely not SNL. It could be these other late night shows because they seem to be a little bit more inviting towards smaller, less well-known bands. But I don't know. Is it Spotify? I feel like that's probably not the answer. Is it Pitchfork? Is it Bandcamp? I don't know. I don't know what that is. Is it just people watching live shows and happening upon? Yeah, I don't know. I'm getting into the weeds here. So let's move on. So that was the elements. So the elements of traditional late night show: monologue, news, main topic, celebrity interview, possibly games if you're James Corden or Jimmy Fallon, and live performances. I will acknowledge that as a huge fan of British panel shows, British comedy, the equivalent of British late night. I love games. Maybe it's because James Corden is James Corden, but I can't even go near it. And Jimmy Fallon for a very similar reason, although I don't dislike Jimmy Fallon the way I do James Corden, but I can't get on board for their games. Notable example on the internet, Hot Ones, where they're eating wings and going through the interview. I think that's an indication of how things are going to go in the future because it's brilliant and it works every time. So anyway, let's go over to criticisms of what I just addressed. First one is whether or not you're talking about monologue. Late night, especially in the US, it's a dated format. It's very formal. Usually they're in suits. Seth Meyers started in suits and then started not wearing suits after a certain point to make it a little bit more informal. I think that's a good choice. But yeah, the format of the interview show, the format of the late night talk show came out of, pre-television, came out of radio. And that was decades ago. That was 100 years ago. So, evolve or die, adapt or die. Have we adapted as a late night thing? I don't know. I think there's an opportunity to. It also speaks to the fact that the late night hosts tend to be really long-lived. How long was Jay Leno on the air for his show? Or Conan for that matter, depending on how you count. Depending on how you count, Conan's been on the air for 30 plus years now. It's adapt or die. So anyway, the news is too late because of the internet, because of, everything. So again, I think SNL's Weekend Update has it, which is they're saying, hey, here's the news in case you missed it, or, let's do jokes about the news. But the idea that a late night show would be breaking news is basically an impossibility. So I don't even know why you would try at that point. Main topic. Topics don't go deep enough. And I think I want to point to podcasts as an idea where if you have an unlimited amount of time, you can go deep. I think the closest example of a late night show that does go deep is John Oliver's Last Week Tonight. Yeah, I think it has to do with authenticity and getting past the fluff. And you have to go deep if you want to actually, interact with people these days, is my opinion. I think that's why podcasts are so successful. Even video podcasts like on YouTube. Once you get to, I'll talk about that stuff later. But anyway, celebrity interviews. Again, the criticism, and I sort of talked about it, shallow, overly scripted, what have you. It's just, if you know the anecdote was pre-planned, it doesn't matter how hard Jimmy Kimmel or Jimmy Fallon laughs. You know what it is, and so it's I don't know. And then the live performances, especially for the artist, who are they for? Who are they really for? Because they're not for the studio audience, because the studio audience is just there to make laughter noises and applauses. Applauding. I don't know. The live performance thing, I don't know. But let's talk about some solutions now. So I think obviously the big one, and it's not just the monologue, but it's the whole thing. Less formal, more direct, more kind of what I'm doing, speaking right down the barrel to the camera, with an awareness of it. Not just a man in a white man in a tie and a suit, giving it to you, but like actually like for real, less formal, more direct. The long form stuff I think works better because of that. As far as news goes, yeah, again, I keep saying this, but Weekend Update I think gets it, because there's no point in trying to break news if you're a late night show, because that's just not, the internet's too fast. Everybody gets it on their phone. It's what's existed previous to that incident that happened a couple months ago. Main topic, again, deep dives, long form YouTube. Yeah. If people are tuning in for the celebrity, that's going to be the main topic, or the deep dive, they're tuning in for that. They're not tuning in for the fluffiness of it. I think, again, this is why Last Week Tonight with John Oliver is so successful, is because he sticks to a topic, he goes as far with the topic as he can reasonably go, and there's a use there. Most of the stuff that he addresses is soul crushing, but that's the tone of the show, and that's what it is. And if it's celebrity interviews, say what you want about Joe Rogan and his show, but I think he tapped into something, and I think he's aware that he tapped into something, whether or not he was willfully doing it or not. Once you get to a 3-hour podcast, even the most disciplined person sticking to a script is going to run out of material, and they're going to start going off the cuff. Argument to be said that they're becoming real, they're becoming themselves. You're actually getting a window into who they are as a person. There's a performative aspect to it, so I don't fully buy into that, but the idea is you go long enough, especially on Joe Rogan's podcast, that you get past all the artifice and you get to two people interacting, Joe and the person he's interacting with. And his podcast is not the only one. There's hundreds or thousands of podcasts that are like this, where the connection, the personal connection, the authenticity, the humanization of it all. Again, I think podcast interview format is very useful for that. So anyway, and then live performance, again, I really honestly don't know. Considering what I know about how Spotify treats independent artists, I don't know the solution to the problems with live music and up and coming artists getting noticed, but the live performance is definitely going to be permanently part of late night shows as long as they still exist. So I wish there was a more usefulness there. Anyway, the next column is a new, better late night show. We'll go to the end for that. So let's go to cautionary tales and criticisms of said cautionary tales, because I think there's a few. Where do you draw the line? There's been so many late night shows. I think the two that really deserve to be considered cautionary tales that are different from traditional late night shows are the Pete Holmes Show and A Little Late with Lilly Singh. Let me pull up the Pete Holmes Show, just so you at least know what it looks like, because I'm certain you've never heard of the Pete Holmes Show. So that's the Pete Holmes Show. Have you ever heard of it? I watched it when it was on. I enjoyed it. It was different. It was very informal. It was very silly. I thought the writing was really good. I enjoyed the sketches, but everybody in my life, nobody watched it. And eventually it died in a whimper. And so I don't know. It doesn't help that Pete Holmes was a Conan protege. So basically Conan, a rich straight white man, gave Pete Holmes, a basically rich straight white man, a late night show. So, especially culturally where things have evolved, is that a good look? Was that a good look then? I don't know. But nobody watched the Pete Holmes Show, so it doesn't really matter. So that's a big old, back over. That's a big old who cares. I thought they were doing something interesting, but I couldn't sit through the whole show. So, And at least anecdotally, the more I've been exposed to the Pete Holmes as a stand-up or whatever, in small doses, fine, but in, the amount that like you would have to see for like a Seth Meyers type show, I don't know if I'd be willing to stomach that much Pete Holmes. Maybe I'm just sensitive. The other one is A Little Late with Lilly Singh, and I can pull that up too. The thing about that is there's been so many, especially YouTubers, who did such a good job talking about how flawed the show was and how it was doing it. I don't really think it's even my place to pass judgment other than to say they tried to get Lilly Singh, the YouTuber, to work as a late night host for her own show that she seemed to have a lot of control over, and it didn't work. And I went for 2 seasons, but I don't know. There's a million video essays doing a really good job addressing all of that, and I point to all of that instead of getting into it specifically, other than to say it was of no appeal to me, and I watched a couple episodes right when it came out, and it did not appeal to me, nor do any of the other late night shows. But I think the most rounded criticism of her show, other than the combativeness of the show, was it was just an uncomfortable format, and she, as a host, as a personality, seemed genuinely uncomfortable with the late night format. We could speculate all day as to if she changed and adjusted and made the format a little bit more usable to her brand of comedy, to her type of stuff. Who knows? She had 100 something episodes to figure it out, and she did not figure it out. So at the end of the day, most personalities don't get that many episodes to try, so it is what it is. Let's talk about notables. If I can find it, there we go. Yeah, again, I'm trying to find shows that are not being normal, because I honestly, you could point to basically any of the primetime late night shows, any of the network late night shows ever, and they're all very similar. Even James Corden, even though he's doing games, even Jimmy Fallon, even though he has a game every single time. So these shows are not that. The Eric Andre Show. If you've seen it, it's wild. It's completely off the walls. It's a lot. I never got into the humor. I never got into the tone of it, but it's basically the anti-talk show. And honestly, I'm upset that I didn't come up with this idea. So all credit in the world due. Yeah. So I'm not into the tone, but it's neither here nor there. So it's a thing, but it's very much satirizing the actual traditional talk show. There's a couch, there's a host, there's a musical, there's a brass corner, the whole thing. Next one up, Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. I keep going back to this, but it's for a reason. His deep dives are incredible. I wish shows did deep dives. Unfortunately, the deep dives that he goes into, make my brain cry, but that's the point of the show. So it's incredibly well written. It has jokes, but it's really about the deep dive. So it's tone perfect for the audience that it's going after. I can't deny that. So it also helps that they immediately put the segments online the next day, even though it's HBO, which is behind a paywall. So something worth addressing, I think. Next up, The Daily Show, The Colbert Report. I'm calling them the same thing because it was the same era and it was the same thing. When I was in middle school, high school, I watched The Daily Show. I watched The Colbert Report. I did. I fell off by the time Trevor Noah, a name I remember, got on there. It wasn't personal. I'd stopped watching at that point. The Colbert Report I could never get into. I understand it's a satire, and I understand that it's sort of trying to take the mick out of especially Republicans, but I think just the politicalness of it in general, I was like, I'm not interested. It's not for me. But yes, I was very much present for when The Daily Show had basically all of the stars that are now, in their 40s and 50s, including Steve Carell, Samantha Bee, everybody else. So, yeah. But again, I stopped watching it because at a certain point, it wasn't interesting to me. The format didn't interest me. It just felt like, the comedy version of, news. So, and then we have the Joe Rogan Experience. And again, this is polarizing, and I understand that. I acknowledge that. I'm not endorsing what he's been doing lately because it's real messy. It's really hard to get behind where he's taken the show lately. But you got to acknowledge the fact that he's knocking out these long form episodes like nobody else in the world, and it speaks to people. And I think my theory is, and he knows it. He gets past the artifice. He lets his people, his guests, talk until they've satisfied whatever they want to talk about. There's definitely problematic angles to address, like having people with inherently dangerous and destructive ideas given a legitimate platform with a gigantic audience. I think there's a responsibility there that's not being fully appreciated, but at the end of the day, I think his goal was to give everybody an equal shake and give everybody an opportunity to prove that they're human and prove that human connection is only as simple as having a long conversation. And I think he succeeded in that. And I think other podcasts and other shows have taken the hint. So, which cuts directly against, the whole late night of it all, which is this artificial, formal, from the old-timey version of stand-up, the old-timey vaudeville, where a man in a suit tells jokes to the rubes, to the locals, to the hicks. I think we're all the hicks now. I think we've as a society, the internet has made us all more or less the same, whereas it's not us versus them. It's not the city comic talking to the farmers anymore. Anyway. I also want to address, see if I can find it over here. British panel shows across the pond. I've sort of already addressed this. I love them. I can't get enough of them. My theory why the British panel shows, the British sort of late night comedy shows are just different. They rely much more heavily on stand-up comedians and established comedy personalities than they do sort of just straight celebrities, even though they do still have celebrities. I think they just evolve differently. I think American late night shows, American panel shows, that they don't necessarily exist anymore, but also American game shows, they evolved in one direction, and the British shows evolved in a different direction. I am fascinated by British panel shows, British game shows. I'll probably do a whole video about that at some point, but the ones I want to acknowledge are Would I Lie to You, which I will pull up. Actually, the first one is 8 out of 10 cats. Does count down. So actually not even 8 out of 10 cats, but 8 out of 10 cats does count down. Jimmy Carr hosts it, who is an established British comedian in the US. So the fact that he's all over British television, that's how different the two things are, where he's just sort of around in the US for roasts and the occasional game show. He's all over British television. The other one is Would I Lie to You, which is just a straight up game show with just a few celebrities and a bunch of stand-up comedians, and it's fascinating, and I enjoy it immensely. There's a whole slew of other game shows, talk shows, all this kind of stuff, but just stuff that we don't have in the US. If the US wants to do a game show, it's going to have celebrities and it's going to have regular people, and they're going to be this big spectacle, like most important, this whole thing, which, we have American Idol, they have whatever it's called, we have the dance thing, they have Strictly Come Dancing, all that too, but they have this additional breed of sort of panel show that's just comedians being silly, which I appreciate. To be fair, Chelsea Lately had a panel on it when it was out. I don't have still have Chelsea Lately. But having actually attended a couple tapings of Chelsea lately, those are not panel shows. Those are just a nightmare, because there's no time for, like, the comedians are competing for minutes to talk, basically. It's tough to sit through. So yeah, I don't know. I guess I didn't explain that very well, but I'm a big fan of British live TV. Anyway, moving on. So let's actually get to the new late night talk show. What that looks like in the U.S. What that looks like going forward. If a studio or if a production company came to me and said, "Hey Matt, what do you think? What's going to get the young kids interested?" First, I would say, I'm not a young kid, so you should probably ask young kids that question. But if it's my generation, if it's a generation right below me, I care about some very specific things, and most of what late night is, I find to repel me, just inherently repellent, and it's not personal. It is what it is. Half of that is the internet. Half of that is the fact that we get our information directly now. So there's no point with news. If I want to do, celebrity goss or whatever, I can just look up that person and they have interviews. A lot of them do podcasts, and that's very satisfying. And so, what use is a late night show to me? So let's try to address this. The monologue, / the format, / the tone, / the formalness of it. Informal. To make a more authentic tone. Podcasts. I'm serious. YouTube. I feel like with James Corden, with Jimmy Fallon, with any of them, with Jay Leno, you can read the artifice between the lines. We understand facial cues for the most part. I'm the worst at it, but even I understand that Jimmy Fallon is thinking something in his head differently than what he's expressing on his face, and it feels weird. It feels incongruous. It feels like you're being tricked. That's how it feels. So yeah, more authentic tone. That's what I'm getting at. Let me just check this. The monologues. Should have done this first, I guess. Lose the monologue. Lose the news. Lose the fluff. The same reason why if you're reading an article on your phone or on your computer, you have to scroll through the first 4 paragraphs because it's fluff. We don't need the fluff in the shows. We don't need the monologue. We don't need the space filler, because we're going to fill the space with actual, people talking, people demonstrating that they're people who you can emote with, you can resonate with, you can have a connection with emotionally. We don't need the preamble. Yeah. In addition to that, the main topic, I think John Oliver has a good system with the deep dives, single topic deep dives. Podcasts have made an entire brands, entire podcasts off the idea of a deep dive. Big fan. I can choose to either watch the deep dive or not watch the deep dive, and it shouldn't matter, because I'm there for the quality of the content. I think again, Last Week Tonight proves that theory over and over again. It also helps that they have good writing. So, and then as far as music goes, I still don't have a good theory on the live performance stuff. Like I said, I don't think Spotify is helping independent artists and up and comers as much as it could, but I don't think any of the alternatives do either. Maybe live shows, but for the sake of the fact that late night is always going to have some sort of musical element, and they're going to bring on up and coming bands, hopefully, I would like that to be a breakout to a longer thing. The way Conan used to have additional content, I believe Seth Meyers has additional content. I think it'd be interesting to, during the late night show, see the performance, but also have access to, probably online, the green room of the band, an interview with the band, the band being people too, because in the same way the celebrity is trying to trying to push their mush, just like everybody else, so is the band. The band is trying to sell tickets, butts and seats, and as much as the artificialness of a traditional late night show interview is about that, and it feels gross and artificial, I'm a little bit more sensitive to the bands doing that, because they either can play music or they can't. So anyway, And then I think the last thing, and I think SNL absolutely nails this every single time, as does Seth Meyers, as does James Corden with his games, but the show needs to be multi-platform, which is to say, the bits need to be chopped up and put on YouTube. They need to be chopped up and put on Facebook Live. They need to be chopped up and put on, the streaming website, so that if you just want to watch individual bits and not the whole show, which is how I absorbed Late Night with Seth Meyers. It's how I absorbed most of SNL. That's the way of the world. It's weird that, like, I'm sure Conan does this, but I'm not even sure I see Conan stuff other than his podcast, which again indicates that he seems to understand that, the podcast format is useful, is helpful, is a different element. And I gotta say, having sat through several of Conan podcasts now, that's a broken sentence, but anyway, having sat through multiple podcasts that Conan did, I appreciate the podcast. I enjoy myself listening to the podcast much more than I ever did watching Conan at his late night show. And so, yeah. So, back to the question, can late night be saved? Is there a place for late night in the millennial or the Z generation, going forward? Or does it just deserve to die on the vine? Because it's been around for too long anyway. And again, the leaving it on for your cats or they're going to age out / die. And those are the people that watch that kind of stuff. Is that where it dies? I don't know. I feel like it'd be an awful waste of effort for it just to die and not evolve. Also, as somebody who works on set, the late night shows seem like a absolute awesome. It's an air conditioned set. Everything's there. You just got to do the live show. Like that's awesome. As a performer, as a writer, as an audience member, it seems worth it. Unfortunately, the content is the problem right now. But I genuinely believe if late night genuinely wants to live, if late night genuinely wants to have a future, it needs to change how it's presenting itself, because it's stale and dated and alienating, and a couple of the segment styles need to be adjusted to be a little bit more authentic, real, human, and I think that would be good. I don't know who's going to do it. If somebody with studio connections or production company connections wants to hire me to put together a pilot, I'd love to. But at the end of the day, I don't know. Somebody's gonna figure out this formula and make it work, and they're gonna make it work. And credit to James Corden again. It's begrudging credit, because he took a very ancient, version of late night and put his games into it, which I would argue he siphoned off from the fact that he came through the UK, game panel world where comedians are kind of just left to their own devices. He put that into a show, and it made stuff like Carpool Karaoke a huge hit. But at the end of the day, he's still if he's still at the show, I think he's quit it by now. He's still buying into the idea that late night in the traditional American sense is the only way to do it. I don't necessarily think that's the case. So, I don't know. Yeah. Do I have anything else to say? I wish Joe Rogan was a little bit more sensitive to who he puts on and how he appreciates what his audience is, because he's made a dynasty, and then he's made that dynasty full of crazy people. And I don't share the opinion that crazy people need to have the same amount of voice as everybody else because they're crazy. Because you need rational human beings to be making choices, because if you just have crazy people making choices, then you just go back to the extremes, and then you end up in a situation where there's no such thing as compromise, there's just chaos. So that's what it is. I hope one day there's a better late night show. I've yet to see one, but I think Last Week Tonight with John Oliver is very close. That's my speech. Like, share, subscribe if you're into it, and catch you on the next.